Now we're skipping the intro once again, and we need to get right into this because, to be honest, while I didn't even want to talk about what just went down because it is that bad, what just happened is really important for everybody to be aware of, and everyone needs to see how hip-hop just stood together to once again send a message to the worst people in it. Well, before we go any further, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so hip-hop culture can stay protected. We are at that point where things are this bad. And now with all of this, what I am specifically referring to was the big swing and attempt to stomp on the Clipse's album right before it dropped and sabotage it just days before it came out, and once again and for the wrong reasons. We are seeing Push and Malice continue to have trouble within the industry and be some of the worst treated people within it. Because now on one hand, while the Clipse album has already joined a tier of records like Good Kid Mad City, Graduation, and The Carter 3, it is not for any good reason necessarily, but it is because just like these records in the past, the album had an attempt to be leaked and ruined right before it came out. But now what is very different about the era we are in now, as the consumption of music does not work in the same way where these leaks happen so often. Well, while back in the day, a lot of these leaks generally happened because of fans or just people getting hold of the projects early, well, between artists that the Clipse are beefing with and the machine that they have decided to go against when they left their label, really, this situation is a lot more complicated than you could have ever expected, and when you piece together how the chain of events unfolded when the timeline got the news that the Clipse album was being heard early, you will see that this was not a rogue leaker or anything like that, but really this was a planned and meticulously thought out event to try and step on the moment that Pusha T, Malice, and the rest of the Rap Avengers are trying to create. But now before we go any further into that, well, first off, make sure to leave a like if you have not already so everybody can see how disgusting this other side of hip-hop is moving. But now before I go into who really is responsible for this and what was happening in terms of who tried to do this, what I want to say, which is good news for this leak and what they tried to do, is now that despite seeing somebody try to do something like this which just takes the fun out of music completely and disrespects the entire, not even rules of hip-hop, but just how you should respect something that people put work into in general that they are going to use to support themselves and their family, well, at least now, while some leaks are so bad, especially in hip-hop, that it has caused albums in the past to get cancelled or delayed, and we have seen hip-hop lose entire classics from people like Eminem and Nas for this very reason. Well, at least in this instance, for the loser and the team that was behind creating all of the chaos around the Clipse record leaking, well, for the people who were all pretty much Drake and Travis Scott stans showing that they were listening to this thing and the rest of us just ignoring it, well, what ultimately was discovered in this mess was that the leak was not even the actual record, but almost a decoy in a sense, as it was a super low quality rip of the album which was seemingly taken from a test CD or something like that. And it almost does seem like Pusha T, Malice, and Pharrell were aware that this could possibly happen and that the entire industry is pretty much against him, which is why seemingly with these copies of the record, well, in this leak, from missing songs to instrumentals which we already know were updated to confirmed features like Nas and Tyler the Creator not being there, and then having So Be It Part 1 on this record rather than the confirmed for the track list So Be It Part 2. Well, what we are seeing with all of this is that whoever got their hands on this album and tried to ruin the entire experience right before we all hear it, well, they failed on so many levels, as they got maybe a version of the record that seems like it's what Def Jam may have had all the way back in the summer of 2024, or just a demo of the record in general. And with all of this, and let's just remember, Pusha T and Malice have been treated by the industry in their careers almost worse than anybody else. So again, it would not be too out there to think that they were ready for something like this to go down at any chance possible, because again, when we see that the features we know about were missing and songs were not there, and then even beyond that, based on what else could be happening, even the features we do know about could be set up as a distraction to hide from potentially bigger things like another Kendrick Lamar guest verse and even a Jay-Z feature, which is seeming like more of a possibility, although of course it would catch us all off guard because as the features have already been announced, while Pusha T and Clipse have seemingly set all this up to be a masterful surprise, well, really, with how Push, Malice, and Pharrell designed this entire record, you could say that with the surprises and the constant evolution in terms of what we know is on the record now compared to what was on here, in a way, you could say that between what they do as artists and then with all of the right side of hip-hop culture respecting them enough to not even go near this record and entertain the idea enough to make it actually take away from the moment that we're all going to get on Friday, Well, what we are seeing is that the attempt to ruin this album failed, and as Pusha T literally put out more signed copies of the vinyl for the record up for pre-order right when this happened, and they sold out very quickly. Well, really, with this very moment, it is showing in a way that every time somebody tries to mess with Clipse and this entire circle of hip-hop, well, they have some of the most support in the entire genre, and it seems like anytime another artist tries to mess with them, the fans only come together more and back their art up and make sure that everybody knows what it is worth, because this is how much we want this music. And really, in a diluted rap game, this is how much we are willing to support and stick up for the people who are making sure that the craft we all love keeps growing and thriving. But now with all of this, unfortunately, while this is the good part of all of this, and that's why I wanted to lead off with it, while the Clipse have been able to defeat the leak game in a way and are still going into the launch of their album with massive expectations and projections with all of the stars and moments surrounding it, well, now beyond the Clipse being ready for anything, when it actually comes down to everything that went into putting this leak out, well, there was a whole campaign that was seemingly made around this leak, which needs to be addressed. And now when it comes to who would want to ruin the biggest rap album of 2025, arguably, and an album that Roc Nation is putting out entirely with their backing on a scale like we have never seen, well, off rip, there are 3 names who are all rappers who could have had a part in this, but I'm not going to waste my time on the first of these 3, which you can probably figure out pretty easily if you see who has been bashing Roc Nation nonstop and Jay-Z on the timeline over and over again. And now with one out of the way, besides from that crash out, who I just don't think is in control enough or even has enough connects in the industry anymore to leak something of this scale, well, from here we are left with 2 artists and circles that both would have gotten a lot to gain from in terms of stepping on the absolute rap cinema that is about to go down when it drops on Friday, and you probably guessed who these 2 are, and of course none other than Travis Scott and Drake. And now what I am saying here, while we are putting the pieces together, in terms of there being an actual campaign to leak this record and try to damper the actual moment that the Clipse are making, this is something that is real, and this leak just had to be more than a random person putting something out in the first place, because I know this. And now I really say this with confidence due to the fact that there was a weird rollout to how the news even came out about this in the first place, which was that with one of the biggest rap pages out right now in terms of breaking and reporting stories, well, they told us that the Clipse album has surfaced online in a post that was more strange than ever, as you couldn't even interact with it unless you were a member of their page, which is something that they have never done with any major post, and everybody is collectively seeing that right now. And now making things even worse and showing that this is all really set up even more, they just posted some touring data about the Clipse tour to try and push this narrative that they are flopping. And of course, as this is stuff that these accounts never put up, even when actual tours like Drake's last one flopped to the point that seats were open and it was canceled, well, this entire thing is just a mess. And now seriously, as we now see when you look into the actual ticketing report that came out from the Clipse, you can see that they left the group that released these numbers' name on the actual piece of paper, which if you look close and then just do a quick search, you can see that that is the group that is also working for Travis Scott. Well, again, something is up, and seriously. Well, with the timing of all of this and even how this followed right alongside Travis Scott and all of his Jack Boys 2 announcements, well, that already raises a flag to me. And also, now, as I know that other artists have done stuff like this in the past and used these pages to plant stories on their rivals, and for example, with the same storyline on these types of pages. And again, I don't want to use specific names and get anybody in trouble, but what I will say, and it's something that I have covered in the past this year, which should give you a little more context, there was an artist who was getting ready to drop an album who had a story from his team directly be planted on these types of pages that was saying that Drake was thinking about dropping on the same night, which I later found out was an entire thing that his PR team put out. Well, now hearing all of this, and as I have talked about before, as I personally used to do social media for artists and rappers, what I can say is that in terms of the rollout of all of this and how they isolated the interactions, it is totally something that is in line with what I have seen in the past and the level artists are willing to go to step on one another. And again, as I have worked in this space and I can spot a post that was contracted by a team or group rather than an organic one very quickly, well, something is off, especially as Travis Scott was starting his rollout for Jack Boys 2 and getting it into gear with a new song and then saying it's coming out in July right as his rival's album is being leaked. And now honestly, when you talk about stuff, especially in this era in the industry where things are just so deceptive and quiet, what I will say is that when you look at all of this and put these moves together, Well, in terms of purposefully getting your team to leak an album and then plant a story and then start a rollout at the same time, well, this leaves us with one group who was responsible for leaking the Clipse record, and it is the guy who was putting out a half version of his album to try and get the vinyls out to, I guess, compete with Pusha T in the first place. Well, again, when you put into perspective the context of all of this, it's either him and his team who did it, or it could be the labels who want this independent release and Rock Nation project to fail, but it is looking like this was more from a rival artist, just based on how the media was used to let everybody know that according to quote-unquote online sources, everything about the Clipse, which was all negative, was happening. And now with this, when we just see rappers trying to ruin other rappers' albums, not with a musical counter, but again, with these lame and whack moves which just ruin the rules of competition and trade them in for these cringe gotcha moments, well, let's just say with Drake, for example, while I obviously don't like what he is doing and I am tired of his antics and what he represents, I would never support leaks or wish that they happened on his music coming out like what we saw in this attempt from Clipse here, because it just dampers the way that an artist can actually enter the musical arena on their own terms and compete whether I want them to win or lose. And again, when we just see these Drake fans and Travis fans for that matter now just have such a disregard for the code that has always been accepted in rap between artists, well, overall, these weird narratives and games that these teams are using to try and take down other rappers needs to stop. But as it does not look like this is anywhere out of sight yet, and to be honest, with the way these teams move, who knows what could happen next? Well, now, as we are still stuck in this era and limbo in rap where there's rappers who can't rap and fans who don't actually like the culture of it all trying to just ruin what everything in rap has always meant and represented, well, what I can say is that hopefully when Clipse drops, they will really turn everything up when this record releases on its own time, and from there, they will sort out every single one of these clowns forever. And now with all of this said, let me know, what do you think of what just went down with this Clipse leak? What do you think about who was responsible, what was really going on, and what the goal was ultimately? And do you think that maybe this was from the artist like I am saying, or do you think maybe the industry was involved as a whole? Because of course, as Push and Malice left the label system, there is a lot working against them in a way that we really don't see with most artists. Now, I can't wait to hear what you have to say about all of this. Now, if you made it to this point in the video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It really does help me out a ton, especially on a video like this. And now, if you want to see how right before this, well, listen, I already saw that Drake and Travis Scott were trying to take down Kendrick Lamar, Pusha T, and this entire Clipse record. And from musical competition to cringe antics like this, well, they just started doing whack things, but they have more up their sleeves, which I talk about there. Check out the suggested video.